Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. Darren Mitchell here, and another very special guest. Another wonderful guest from the States, this time a little bit outside of Texas, a place called Marble Falls, Mr. Nathan Jamail. How are you, my friend?
Brother, I'm just living the dream.
Now, for those who are listening in, we've had a 10-minute conversation before we press record about that and how it means different things in different countries.
It does. Apparently, I should not stay in Australia too frequently.
Well, in Australia, we have this amazing ability to be really honest, but also sarcastic at the same time. So often, I'm living the dream says I'm doing anything but.
That's right. Well, hey, listen, it's applicable. You never said it was a good dream. Could be a nightmare.
It could be, and as long as we're being authentic about it. But the other thing we spoke about is you've got to be really careful on who you surround yourself with, because you were sharing a little story about a person coming into a new country or a new town and asking the person at the petrol station, what are the people like around here? And you were saying, well, what were they like where you were? And depending on how you respond to that, the answer is going to be exactly the same as where you came from. So whether you like people or don't like people, you'll find the same thing wherever you go.
Very true statement. I lived in 7 states in the U.S., and I believe it to be true. I've found awesome people in every 7 states.
Isn't it interesting? And we're going to talk about sales and sales leadership today because you've been in this business for a long, long time. I guess, would you call yourself the CEO and founder of Jamail Development Group? Or do you have a name for yourself?
I call myself, technically on paper, I'm the president, but I'm just a working schmo who's trying to help people sell more and lead better.
And a person who is also no longer in control of their own travel schedule, correct?
That's right. I am not allowed to work the calendar. I tend to fly to the wrong countries, states, and wrong days. So, as we say at my office, do what only you can do, and preferably not what you do poorly.
That's right. Because you were sharing a story, and I won't reveal the name of the organization, but you were due to fly to do a big keynote to a big organization, and then you realized that you couldn't physically get there because of the time difference. So that didn't go too well. I did
not know you in Australia were a full day ahead. So I never gave myself credit for being the sharpest knife in the drawer. So, so I don't do calendar. I have someone who does the calendar, and they do it very well.
Absolutely, that's a good tip. First tip. So Nathan, you're an author, you're a speaker, you're a speech writer. Although maybe you've got that outsourced as well, but I probably suspect that you do your own speeches. Also a coach and best-selling author of, it says 5 books. Well, we just had the conversation. There is 4 books plus a little book that actually gone viral. So you might as well talk about that being the 5th book. So it's only a wee little book. We're going to talk about sales and sales leadership, particularly in the environment that 2024 presents us with. Just for the listeners' benefit, can you give us a bit of a background on where this all started for you? Because often I like talking to people that how they got into sales, and particularly in what you do, working with big organizations and helping salespeople and leaders get better and build better cultures. What sort of led you to this? And was there a catalyst at some point in your career that led you down this path?
Probably a lot of bad decisions. But I think where I started, I've been in sales all my life. I have never had a salary job as a young adult or an adult. When I was in high school, I worked full time from the time I was a sophomore till I graduated, and I worked retail. And so that's kind of where I figured this sales thing out. And, the company's no longer around, but I worked for Circuit City back in the 80s, giving you my age now. And then and stayed in retail and moved to Indiana. And then I got into financial services sales, so life and health insurance and mutual funds, and learned a lot of what to do and what not to do. And then I got into technology and sold beepers and pagers to corporations in the early 90s. And so some of my clients are like, I don't even know what a beeper is. And I did that, and I was did pretty well as a sales guy, and I went into state government accounts. And then that's when I got my first leadership role as a regional manager for Mobilecom back in the day in New Orleans, Louisiana. So I moved again. That was my fourth move, I think. And then in 1997, an old boss of mine came to me, asked me to be the corporate sales manager for Sprint Wireless.
Okay.
Back then it was Sprint PCS, and there was a handful of employees. Didn't even know what the phone was going to look like when I started. But it's going to be great. And so I'm like, yeah, let's do that. That sounds like a great idea. And it was. And so I spent 9 years in telecom with Sprint and moved quite a bit and became a leader there. And then I decided in 2005 I was going to write a book, and I had the nickname The Preacher. I traveled quite a bit doing speeches for my clients, and I got the nickname The Preacher and loved doing it, and did a lot of selling skills training and leadership training for my team and the clients' teams. And then I decided to leave corporate America and go chase my dream. And it's been spectacular. It's been a hell of a road from a couple of not bankruptcies, but going broke a couple of times to trying to figure it out and doing everything you can imagine wrong.
Yeah.
And now I spent the last, goodness gracious, almost 20 years, 15 years working with clients. I travel. I work with thousands and thousands of sales leaders and salespeople across the country and across all industries. That's it. And I'm just a sales guy, man, and a small business owner. I've owned 6 small companies, but I'm just a working schmo.
So with that, going through Sprint, because my background is also telecommunications at the 2 biggest companies in Australia. And I remember back in the early 90s, the mobile phone concept was really new, really foreign. We had the first mobile phone was like this big briefcase with this massive handset that you could walk down, and there were people walking down the street on a telephone. You're thinking that's really weird. And then it went into a car. Looking at all the technology, and you mentioned that you started to do a lot of training for your sales team, and you were coined as the preacher, obviously doing a bit of training for others as well. Was it something that you just evolved into, or was it a conscious decision to say, hey, I love this? And did you see it as an opportunity to, I guess, broaden your impact and have an impact on more people, or was it something else that was the driving force for you chasing your dream?
I just thought it was so much fun.
Okay.
I've never had a job I didn't like. Well, that's not true. I was a janitor in between sales jobs once when I was a teenager. Didn't like that one. But it got me my sales job because the guy said, anybody who go be a janitor, well, you're willing to do a lot to get to where you want to be. So I'm like, or not smart, one or the other. But yeah, for me, man, I loved when I was at Sprint. I loved being a director of sales out there, and I had a massive team, and I loved it. And for me, it was like, I just had so much fun being on stage, and I felt like it was where I was making the biggest impact. Sales leader, I was fortunate enough to be the leader of 6 number 1 teams in 7 states in 7 years. And so it was just, I always say God gives you a gift. That's the only gift God gave me. My wife will test you, there's no more. That's it. And so,
Certainly not travel arranging.
Right, not travel arranging. And I found my gift on stage. So between teaching and selling and sales leadership, it became kind of a natural fit. And I got out in 2005 and 6, wrote my first book in 2008.
Yeah.
And, went around and spoke wherever I could, for whoever would listen.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, things just started to take off.
Love it. And when you were making that transition, if you look back now and compared to what you teach now, compared to what you teach or taught back then, has much changed from your perspective in terms of not so much how people sell, because I know we spoke and we'll talk about this in terms of getting salespeople fit or selling fit, but from a process point of view or an approach, techniques, has much changed, do you think, over the last, say, 15, 20 years?
I don't think a lot has changed. I do think what has changed significantly. And let me elaborate on that. I think selling is a skill. I don't think anybody's naturally born salesperson. One of the things I teach is selling is a skill. And just like whether it's golf, dancing, singing, whatever it may be, the more you practice, the better you get. The problem with us in sales is most of us are good enough to wing it. And that's our mistake. And that's been our mistake whether you were selling in the 80s, 90s, or today. I do find that selling back then was the same. How we taught it was different. Not long ago it was features and benefits, and everybody's found new ways and new things, new words to use,
Mm.
whether it's discovery or understanding, as far as how to understand or qualify a customer. I don't think those have changed. I do think this. I think with the advance in technology and the disconnect of human engagement,
Mm.
right? We now sell through texting. We now sell through email. I was doing a speeching for a Canadian client of mine. I was doing some preemptive work, and I'm meeting with one of the VPs, and he says, Nathan, with technology today, and they're in the financial sector, with technology today, customer service, it's not as important anymore because people want it short and sweet. They want to answer in text. And I'm like, see, I think it's the exact opposite. I think today, customer service is 10 times more important than it's ever been because the standard now is so high. Back in the day, you were the information resource.
Mm.
No one knew how to get the information other than from you.
Yeah.
Now I can get it from anywhere. So you better be a lot better than an encyclopedia. Oh, for those young people, Google. But you can no longer just have the knowledge anymore and get the sale. You've got to actually have an impact. And so one of the things that I constantly teach and going back to has changed. I think what's changed more than ever is we have to be a lot more committed to understanding a prospect or client's business,
Mm.
their perspective, and their priorities a lot more than how or why they need our product or service. And I think that's the biggest difference. It takes a lot more to get that sell. And because I think, quite candidly, everybody says commodity sell, non-commodity. Listen, if you got 5 competitors, it's a commodity sell,
Yeah.
right? If I can buy the same thing from 6 different people and you don't want to use price, you better have something to bring to the table. And so that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
I
It's
hope that
interesting.
answers your question a little bit.
Yeah. No, it was a good response.
Bless you.
And
Sorry,
I just put
it's a
myself.
text thing.
Normally it happens in threes. It's interesting you're talking about that because back in the day when I was in sales, you could walk into a chief information officer, chief executive officer. They didn't have chief revenue officers back then, but almost the unwritten ground rule was you had to ask those killer questions about tell me what tell me what keeps you up at night. Tell me more about your business. And there wasn't as much information readily available about that particular organization. I would say that the expectations that customers have now has exponentially increased to the point where they are more educated on the market and more educated on you, and therefore expect you to be more educated on them before any interaction happens. So when you talk about things like customer service, you do have to be at a much higher level in terms of your, I guess, your intellect and your insights and your understanding of the market and where they fit. Not just asking those questions that perhaps we would have asked in the late 1990s, early 2000s. So it puts a lot more pressure on the salesperson, doesn't it? Because often the company you're going to be working with potentially, in many cases, may have already made a decision to engage with you before engaging with you because they've done the research, they've done the thought. So our skill set has to be increased, and we have to think about, well, what's that differentiation? And it's not going to be our product, and it's not going to be the features of our product. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I just wrote a blog. I don't know if it came out yet. It might be coming out this week on perspective over pitching. And what I've found is most salespeople pitch or present their product and services without taking time to understand one's perspective.
Mm.
And listen, I deal with this in a lot of industries, and no one is better or worse than the other. Unfortunately, it's all the way around. We tend to, if you watch a salesperson today, most of them will ask 3 or 4 questions, and they're going, "Let me tell you what you need. How do you know I need it? You don't even know who I am or what I want." And you brought up like what keeps you up at night. I tell salespeople, you've got to go beyond the question people know to ask because otherwise you're all the same.
Yeah.
And so you've got to create these questions that truly are who you are and understand someone. I have a saying. It says, you want to get the job, be good for business.
Mm.
You're good for business, you'll get the job. Think about this for a minute. Darren, it's funny. This is 10 years ago, 20 years ago. and quite candidly, it's probably more true now, if not the same. And that is, if you ask any leader, especially a sales leader, what is the hardest part of being a sales leader or a leader in particular? It's finding talented people. It's finding talented people to be employees. It's still the hardest part of being a leader.
Yeah.
If finding talent is the most difficult part of being a leader, then as a salesperson, my number one goal, Darren, if I'm selling you, is to be your best employee that you never have to pay.
Mm.
And so I tell salespeople, think of selling as interviewing for a job, but you get to ask all the questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I think the biggest struggle of today is still the biggest struggle it's been for 20 years, is that we're not taking the time to practice the game of selling. As I told you earlier, I've been in sales all my life. I think it's the most noble job of any profession, quite candidly. I don't think selling is about leading and convincing people to buy things. I think it's about seeking someone's understanding and serving them. Quite candidly, if you're a great salesperson, you probably make a lot of money. And if you make a lot of money, that means you're serving a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, listen, you get a paycheck for selling something. We make a living by doing the right thing over and over and over again. And so I take it, it's funny. I take selling as a not just a noble job, but a noble deed. And I was turned down a keynote speech because the company wanted me to do a selling keynote, but they didn't want me to use the word sell or salesperson or selling because they found it to be offensive of some sort. So I'm like, so you want me to speak to someone, tell them to be proud of what they do, but yet we're not proud of them. I'm not your guy.
How does that work?
Yeah. Go sell, but apologize for it later.
Well, it's just they've probably got their titles are probably customer success manager or some other sort of term that doesn't include the word sales. But at the end of the day, people understand that and every single person on the planet is in sales. And you said it, it's a
All of
noble
us.
profession, but I think it's the ultimate form of service. As long as you're doing it for the right reasons and you're doing it to serve and to solve a problem, not to do something for your own personal gain.
Listen, if you are selling, I always tell people the only person who can sell anything is a con man, right? You've got to sell what you believe in, and don't worry if you're selling with the wrong intentions. Sooner or later they'll catch up to you.
Yeah.
But selling is a noble job. It's where everything starts. Every business, whether you're in medical, doctor, dentist, chiropractor, whatever, we all need someone to go out and get our name out there so we can serve more patients or more customers. And that's what a salesperson does.
Yeah.
And so but I do find that it is a skill. And unfortunately with selling, it's a skill that you don't have to have perfected to still go out and try and do. Right? I mean, anybody can say they're a salesperson. I believe that a professional athlete practices 90% of the time and plays the game 10% of the time.
Yeah.
I believe anyone who is a professional, doctors practice medicine, they go to training, and they go to med school, and they have to get their continuing education credits. I believe if you are going to be a professional salesperson, you should practice more than you play.
Yeah.
And that's not the case in the majority of organizations.
No, because in the sales game, the vast majority of salespeople, they practice in front of their live customer.
That's right. Well, listen, Darren, I cannot tell you how many times if I'm doing a keynote or a workshop, someone says, Nathan, I'm practicing every day. I said, no, you're playing the game. Because quite candidly, if the customer's in front of you, you're unwilling to take a chance. And quite candidly, the reason why you don't want to scrimmage is because in live sales call, it's gone. You don't even know if you made a mistake.
That's it.
But if you practice, you're like, oh, I'm not me. It's scary. Listen, I do this for a living. And I listen to my recordings of me selling. I'm like, who is that terrible salesperson? Who says that? And it's funny. It's, I use a bit I stole from a thing at church with a relationship guy, and my wife and I were there, and he had a great bit, and I use it now in explaining that our words don't always match our intentions. And the guy says his wife walks into a closet, and she says, I have nothing to wear. Now, Darren, if your wife walks in the closet and says, I have nothing to wear, what is she saying?
I need, I need something new.
That's right. Your wife is saying, I need to go shopping. If I or you walk in the closet and say, I have nothing to wear, what are we saying?
Probably I
Someone
don't want
needs,
to go out.
we have nothing clean to wear. Exact same words, two completely different meanings. And so I talk to salespeople and say, listen, the reason why we practice and scrimmage, you call it role playing, and I can elaborate on that later on, but the reason why we practice is that it makes sure that our words match our intent
Yeah,
and that we're not saying something that we don't mean.
yeah. And so I want to delve into that because I know we talked before about the concept of scrimmaging and practicing. And when you look at all good sports people, good business people, they do a lot of preparation and and they fine tune their, I guess, their skill set or develop this conscious competence or muscle memory to the point where they have confidence that when they're in the game and they execute the strategy, there's a higher probability of them getting a result, but not necessarily being pressured to get the perfect result rather than just winging it. If you look at selling as a skill, are there any is there one above any others that you think we really need to hone in on that we can teach salespeople to really get better at to increase the opportunity of developing this muscle memory and through that process a level of confidence that you're dealing with that you focus on?
Yeah, I like to take that into the whole idea of just scrimmaging. And the reason why is you can use it for everything.
Hmm.
And, no one likes to role play, right? Unless it's at home. But no one likes to role play at work, right? And so, and so,
There's a
and
wardrobe involved there.
that's right. That's right. A whole nother meaning. And so, but no one likes role play. And the reason why is because in business, we've ruined it. We use it to test people. Oh, you think you know how to sell, Darren? You think you know? Okay, let's go. It's a pop quiz. And,
Yeah.
and I'm testing you. And because you know I'm testing you, you're going to say what you think I want to hear. And
Yeah.
that's why you think it's fake because you're not being really you. You're trying to pass the test. So I can say, okay, he knows what he's doing. So
Mm.
since we use it to test people, people hate it. Since we use it to test people, it's fake because they're saying what they think you want to hear. And since you're using it to test people, no one has time for it because I don't need to be tested because I'm already a genius, right? And so, because we're salespeople, we know everything. And so here's my challenge people. There's not an athletic team, whether it's world football, American football, baseball, cricket, whatever it may be, or even acting. There's
Mm.
no one that's on stage or on the field and doing it without getting into character and scrimmaging the game. And
Yep.
there's a big difference between preparing for a meeting and scrimmaging for a meeting.
Mhm.
I do prepare. I need to do research. Who am I talking to get, don't stalk them on LinkedIn and find out their high school photo, but, look at them and get your information, understand who you're going to talk to and why.
Yep.
But there's a step beyond preparation and of just understanding what you need. It's actually making sure you're ready to do the right behaviors. And so if sports teams and everything that is skill based, dancing, acting, whatever it may be, skill based versus knowledge or task based like business, they prepare for the game and they would never show up unprepared. And that is that we need to scrimmage. And so here's why I challenge people. Take the role play out. If you and I, Darren, if you and I are going to see, we're both in technology, right? Let's say we go work for the new phone people, or whatever their names are, and you and I, I couldn't sell an iPhone 15. I actually trying to get one, and I'm like, I just want a phone that takes photos. But if you and I are going to speak to a big corporation, and we're going to talk to them about IT stuff or phones, if you and I scrimmaged, got into character, right? First person, hi, I'm Nathan Jamail, I'm with ABC Company, and I got into character, and we scrimmaged 3 or 4 times. What are the chances that we would do a better job than if we didn't?
Well, we know the answer to that. it'll be,
100%.
it'll be significantly better, right? And the key thing,
Exactly.
and I love your take on this because a lot of the workshops that I facilitate, there is a component of role play or simulations or scrimmaging, and a lot of people when they're taught a new technique or a new framework, we want to stress test that and have them experiment with that and try it and do it. The problem with most people, though, is, and I think this might go back to when they're at school, they're taught almost what to say. So they think, well, I have to say this, I have to use this language, versus the whole point of scrimmaging is and role playing is you want to be yourself, but be yourself within a framework, and let's stress test the framework, but don't pretend to be somebody who you're not.
That's right. Be you.
So, yeah, so it's not about, because I love your take on this, because a lot of sales trainers out there will say, here is a sales technique, here is a killer line, or here is a killer objective handling, objection handling response. Use that. Say this. When they do this, say that. And they go bang, 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 and it doesn't sound authentic. And no wonder they don't get the result, because I think this is crap. This is not going to
That's
work.
right.
I can't do that. I can't say that.
Yeah, Phil felt fine. I mean, listen, no one, I always tell people, be scripted, don't be canned. And what I
Yeah.
mean by be scripted, you scrimmage so much. I'm scripted. It's kind of like when you speak to a friend or a family member. I don't or try and think of what my question is going to be next to get them. I just talk to them.
Mm.
And so one of the things that I wrote a book called The Sales Professionals Playbook. Strongly encourage everyone in the world to buy it. It's one of my favorites. Very humble author. But in the Sales Professionals Playbook, it's a selling skills book. And one thing you'll learn in that book is I never tell you what to say, ever.
Yep.
I teach you a principle. Let me give you an example. Price is always an issue, no matter what you're selling, typically in most businesses. And the biggest mistake people make is they try to overcome price. I think you should overcome your enemies and not objections. I find that if I bring the objection up first, it's a fact. If you bring it up, it's an objection. So
Yep.
when I'm asking you questions, I ask certain questions. I might say, well, let me ask you a question. What is your competitive advantage or disadvantage? Are you the most expensive or least expensive? And when they say I'm the most expensive, I get to say, hey, Darren, good news. We're same boat. I'm having a conversation. I'm not trying to trick anyone. And so back to the idea of scrimmaging, I need to be able to scrimmage this stuff so I'm authentic in my words. And I'm not trying to say something Darren would say. I'm trying to say what Nathan would say. And so this is why it's so important that we practice and scrimmage these words. And back to your training idea, here's what's funny. You've seen it when you get in these groups and you break into groups of three, right? You have an observer and you have a customer and you have a salesperson, and the observer watches them and goes, "Oh, that was so good. That was so good." No, it was terrible. Stop. like, if your kid was walking out of the house with rubber boots and rubber boots and shorts and mismatched clothes, you're like, stop. That doesn't look good. Love your people like you love your kids. Like, care. So again, I think scrimmaging is key. And one thing I challenge people, the biggest reason they have is they don't have time. And so I challenge it. So let me get this straight. How many weeks and months did it take for you to get the opportunity to have that appointment? And if you drive an hour to get there, an hour back, and you meet for hours, 3 hours. Mm-hmm. So 2 weeks and 3 hours, you don't have time for 45 minutes to make sure you're going to be the best version of yourself. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And this is why I blame sales leaders.
Yeah.
See, sales leaders, it's our job to get our people to do the things that they know they should do, but they don't want to do. I was supposed to go to yoga this morning at 5:30. Boy, it was so easy. I found an excuse. I couldn't make it. It was terrible. But if I had a coach to say, get up, fatty, and go do yoga, you can barely touch your toes or your knees anymore, I would have gotten done it. A sales leader, our job is to get our people to do the things that they know they should do but don't want to do, and practice is one of them. Think about it. If a coach of a professional sports team did not mandate practice, what percentage of players would actually show up?
Well, I can say from personal experience in an amateur area, not many.
Not many.
Because I know there are consequences, and there's no peer accountability. There's no standards that have been set.
Yeah. And so coaches, the reason why coaches are the great coaches, they mandate practice. They mandate contribution. They mandate impact. They mandate improvement. And so that's where I think is important in sales leadership. The second thing I have a funny question for you. Here's what I found. Do you know why most sales leaders do not like to scrimmage with their salespeople?
Well, there's a word that ego comes to mind, because I'm the sales leader. I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be better because I've got this position. God forbid if I jump into a scrimmage and I make a mistake or I get something wrong or I sound silly, that is not beholden of my role or my status. I could never do that. That's why they don't go to sales training, Nathan. They'll
That's
send their
very true.
send their team to sales training, but they won't turn up.
And here's what I tell sales leaders. I said, listen, you need to go first and suck. Trust me, they already know you do. Like they know, they tell everyone you're terrible. Here's the
Yes,
good news. Humility is one of the greatest attributes of leadership. And when you show them that you don't have to be perfect, I do executive coaching and I scrimmage with CEOs all the time.
yeah,
And every time I get a new CEO, like Nathan, I don't know, I'm not going to do no role playing. I'm the CEO. I'm like, you're going to with me. And here's what's funny. You fast forward 6, 8 months later,
yeah,
and they're like, hey, I need to scrimmage something with you.
yeah,
And because they've learned that it's not, scrimmaging isn't about not knowing something. It's about making sure that I do my best when I do what I know. And I think that's the power of it. And I mean, listen, I challenge salespeople all the time.
mm,
Give me 1 week.
yeah,
I'm not even, you can't argue with me. I'm not even telling you what to scrimmage. I'm not telling you what to say. All I'm saying is for 1 week and 1 week only. Every day before you make whether you're making a phone appointment or a Zoom appointment or you're going in person,
yeah,
before you do it, find someone who's better than you or at least understands your comprehension and scrimmage 2 or 3 times before you
mm,
do it. Don't, it's in their role play. It's not a show. It's a stop and go. And as soon as you make a mistake, no, Darren, I didn't like the way that sounded.
yeah,
In fact, Darren, you're talking way too fast. I want you to slow it down, back it up, and break up your statement. Like, I mean, those are the kinds of things we're doing.
yeah.
Because one thing I find, salespeople, like I'm doing right now, they just go and it's like someone pulled their string. I'm like, shit, take a breath. Like, let them respond.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree. And in fact, I remember when I was learning how to be a facilitator, how to train, how to do keynotes and stuff like that. And we had mentors, we would be asked to be in the front of a room, and there was a whole bunch of us. And we were given, okay, this is the topic. I want you to simply start your introduction to the topic. And most of us would get about 15 words in, and they'd say, right, stop. That was shit. And they give us feedback, right? But it was the practicing. It wasn't about what to say. It was more about how you bring your entire being to that particular environment so you can convey the message that is believable. And
Yeah,
the only way you can do that is not by reading a book and not by theorizing, it's by practicing.
yeah.
And I wonder, you make the reference to the sales leaders and why they don't get involved. I wonder whether because of that, they're not prepared to do that is because they're so focused on we have to get the number. So everything is the number. So if we're under pressure to get a certain sales target by a certain date, I don't have time to be practicing because we have to make every post a winner. So just get out there and sell. Versus if we take our step back and say, let's just disassociate, we know the number is going to be there. What disciplines do we have to create? And how do we start to invest in a little bit more time to get better at the elocution of the message that will actually take care of the result? So if you listen to a lot of the sports people now, they talk about the process and let's get good at the daily disciplines and the results will take care of themselves.
Yeah. It's funny. I've heard that excuse. Yeah, I've never seen it actually come to fruition. And what I mean by that is I've never seen a sales rep so booked up with appointments that they don't have time to scrimmage. You,
That's
you find me a sales rep who's got that 15 appointments a week, nonstop every week. I'm gonna be impressed, or 20 or 30.
They
But
have time
what
for
I found
coffee though.
was that
They have time for coffee.
they have time for coffee, they have time for Google searches, they have time for TikTok, whatever else is going on. Here's what I found: if a leader believes in it, they'll prioritize it. This is where sales leaders, I talk about belief a lot in my keynotes and in my books. And at the chance of sounding corny, I believe the belief of a human is the actual core of who you are. People who say attitude doesn't matter, look at their success. I promise you, it doesn't matter. You look at someone who says it's everything, look at their success, it's probably everything. And belief is the same thing. And here's where it's really tricky in sales. See, if I believe that scrimmaging is important, I'll make you do it because I believe in it. But if I don't believe in this, or role playing, we'll use that word for a minute. If
Yeah.
I don't like playing or I don't believe it, I'll never make my people do it because
Yeah.
I'll help them come up with an excuse because any excuse that I agree with, I will accept.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's funny, I've seen people talk and salespeople talk and leaders, and I'm big on activity management, but I'm also big on it for different reasons than others. Make 100 calls a week. Well, did you close any? No. Well, make 200. Well, that's stupid. If you made 100 bad ones, 200 bad ones ain't going to do much better. But I do believe you got to figure out, is it a lack of will or a lack of skill? Are you saying the wrong thing? Are you sitting and eating, like whatever it may be, but
Yeah.
whether it's prospecting or presenting or understanding, I think the sales leader's job is to make the salespeople better. Always.
Which means we need to spend more time as sales leaders with our people, and in many cases with customers in the field with our people, but not doing the selling for them. Because there are a lot of
Well,
sales leaders out there that their sales teams actively choose not to bring them to sales calls.
there's only two reasons that a salesperson does not take a sales leader on a sales call. There's only two. And I'll prove it with this. Darren, if you knew taking, we'll use me since it's you and I here. If you knew taking me on a sales call with you, increase your chance of closing it 50%. How often would you want me to go on an appointment with you?
More times than not.
Yeah, if you could get me a 20% increase in opportunity, Darren, I would book your calendar up like a stalker. I mean, I would
Absolutely.
you're going everywhere with me. So I always tell sales leaders, if your salespeople aren't inviting you on meetings, there's one of two reasons. One, they don't think you're any good.
Yeah.
Two, they don't have meetings. That's what I've found in 52 years of my life. That's the most common reason. I do a lot of, in my coaching, I have several sales leaders in my program. And, our rule is 80% of your time is with your reps.
Yeah.
And it's a real game changer for a lot of people, and it's very difficult. If you're a frontline manager, you should be on the floor, if you're people in retail, whatever, or in the field, you should be with them 4 out of the 5 days.
Yeah.
And you can do your office work in the morning and at night. I think you should be doing practice meetings once a week. There's a reason why the newest employee is always the most excited. Right? That's why the newest employees are most motivated. And the reason why is they're learning something. Everybody wants to know how to keep people motivated. Keep teaching them. Right? That person who become complacent, usually more times than not, that complacent person was a successful superstar at one time.
Mm.
The reason they got complacent because the leader stopped pushing them.
Yeah.
And so that's how important this sales leader's job is. It's about teaching people how to be better, continuing to teach them, forcing people to do the things that make them uncomfortable, whether it's scrimmaging or whatever it may be.
And when you talk about forcing them to do things, it's because I want to link that into culture and then talk about how do we get these guys fit. It's pretty hard to build a high performing sales culture when the sales leader is absent or they're leading by absence. They're in their office, they're managing upwards, they're with the VP of sales and doing all the strategy stuff and not spending time in the face of the adversity and the opportunity with their sales reps. If you spend 4 out of 5 days with your sales reps, that's going to have an indelible imprint on the culture that you create. But it also means that from a sales leader's point of view, you're now seen as a person who is not us versus them. You're part of the team and you're one of us. And as long as the sales leader knows their role and doesn't come in like the hero, the white knight on the white horse, wanting to do the deal and disintermediate your sales rep at the time, and instead of doing that, edify your sales rep in front of customers, you'll build a really strong culture where people will do whatever they want, whatever they can for you.
And Darren, I'm okay if you're the sales leader and you take over half the sales calls. I'm okay with it. As long as the sales rep's in the room, because I want you teaching them. What I don't want you doing is sell call on your own, and I don't want you showboating it. But if you go into a sales call and you say, okay, hey boss, Darren, you're the boss, run this for me. I want to see you do it. Okay, cool. Run it. And then the next time I'll run it. And so I'm okay with that. And by the way, I find that what people do is the salespeople can learn to mimic you. or learn ideas, or they see, more importantly, they see how the customer reacts to certain things you say,
Mm.
and then they get to go back and forth. I'm okay with that. What I've found more times than not, and this is kind of where you're going with that too, is the sales leader waits until the closing appointment to come in and park the car in the garage after an 18-day drive. Thanks
Yeah.
for the help, right? And the closer. I'm more impressed with the sales leader who can go on cold calls, who can go on discovery calls. Like if you're truly teaching your people and not just coming in to close the deal because we need to hit our numbers by the end of the month, that's where it gets a little crazy.
Yeah.
I think that's where we miss the boat. To your point, you said earlier, it's hard to have a good culture with a disengaged leader.
Yeah.
You don't. If
No.
your culture's good and you have a disengaged leader, and many might disagree with me, and that's okay. A lot do. My wife does all the time. Is that you're successful despite your leadership, right? It had nothing to do with it.
No.
And so, thank God you got a good team.
Which means your team probably doesn't need you, but you think
Uh,
you think
Right?
you're fantastic because look at the performance. My team are just absolutely humming, and when I really sit back and think about it, I've actually made no contribution to this.
No. And you know what they say? It's because I'm really good at hiring good people and let them do their job.
I'm a good
Yeah,
del,
yeah.
Nathan.
Yeah, I'm a good delegator. Yeah, yeah. I always find that people delegate the junk. But here's what's funny. I'll give you a perfect example. I wrote a book called Serve Up, Coach Down. It's my most recent book. Again, spectacular book. One of my favorite authors. You're gonna love him. He's very humble. But in the book, this tells you as a sales leader, ask yourself this question, and you're not gonna like the answer, and that's okay because that's part of being human. But think about this for a minute, Darren. How many people do you speak to that say, "I'm so good at my job that my boss leaves me alone"? More importantly, how many times have you heard people say, "I want to be so good that my boss leaves me alone"?
Mm.
Now think about this. In sports, the coaches spend all their time with the superstar athletes. In sports, the athletes strive for the coach's attention. In business, our goal is to eliminate our boss's attention. So the question becomes this: how can we say we're valuable when the goal is that people don't want to be with us?
Mm.
I want to be the kind of coach that my people want to be with, not because I'm likable. I'm not. When I wrote the sales leaders playbook, one of the biggest things I work with sales leaders on is you're the boss, not their buddy.
Yeah.
I don't want people. I don't need friends. I want my people to want me around because I'm valuable to them. I help them. I serve them. I
Yes.
coach them and hard on them. I tell people all the time. Listen, I don't need to say you like Nathan Jamail,
Yeah.
but I sure want you to say that I helped and made a difference.
That's it. You want respect because you drive really high standards and standards of excellence, which is what this is all about, being exceptional, right? So having exceptional standards that you're ruthlessly uncompromising in the adherence of those standards. You don't have to like me, but sure as hell you're going to respect me because I'm consistent and I'm going to get the result because I'm pouring into you, and it's done with the best of intentions.
That's right.
Yeah.
Listen, I do an accountability piece, and I always say, it's interesting if my kids at the age of 16 did some of the things my employees did at the age of 30, I'd ground them for a month. And the question becomes, do we hate our kids or we love our kids? And the reason we hold our kids to a higher standard is because we love them.
Yeah.
And we're willing to do the pain and sacrifice. Quite candidly, and I don't know how much time we have left, but the reason why the sales leaders don't hold their people accountable isn't because they're afraid of conflict. Quite candidly, it's not even, maybe some of them don't know how, and that's very true because we don't teach it well enough. But it's not because they're afraid of conflict. It's not because they want to be liked. It's the reason why we don't hold people accountable is because we're selfish. We're afraid they might quit.
Yeah.
We believe a bad body is better than a nobody, especially if you're a roll-up quota leader, where I got 6 guys, all their quotas add up, and my quota. Well, 30% is better than 0. A bad body is better than nobody.
Mm.
And so I don't want to give up my own security, so I keep people on the bad team. I keep bad people on team. I don't push them because I'm afraid they might quit. And quite candidly, I don't have any applicants in the line. And if I find someone, it's going to take me 6 months to find someone, 6 months to train someone. I'd rather have a bad body for 12 than a no body for 12. And we do it out of pure selfishness.
Which drives a really poor culture because it says that if you might have one or two that are really trying to improve that are doing the best they possibly can, and when you see somebody who is a peer that is not towing the line, who is getting away with stuff and there's no consequences for that behavior, it almost says, well, you know what? That's the way we operate here. So my standards will automatically start to reduce, or those people will leave anyway,
That's
which
right.
means you've now overseen a really bad, low performing culture.
And Darren, the turds never leave it. No one wants them.
That's right.
They're yours forever, right? The Scots are leaving. They're going to, your point, they're going to come down to the lower level or they're going to leave. But that
That's it.
one who's lower level, they're never leaving.
That's it. But interestingly, I think there was a snippet I think I heard you talk about on one of your keynotes. High performers that are toxic, because if we think about, there's a lot of high performing salespeople across many industries who might be really good at bringing in the numbers, but they leave a trail of destruction behind them. And so, from
Never
a
worth it.
cultural point of view, as sales leaders, what's the? And I think I know the answer here. How do we deal with this?
It's never worth it. It's never worth it. In sports, if a player, no matter how talented they are, and you can list a bunch of them,
Yeah.
that they get treated from team to team. And the reason why is because coaches know the locker room is more important than the contribution of the player. Here's
Mm.
what I found. One, that they are successful despite themselves. In other words, most likely their success is based very little off their efforts. And two, the damage that they cause to the team itself is way more costly than the revenue which they bring in. And not to mention, everyone knows it.
Yeah.
And you lose respect as a leader, you lose a sense of caring, you lose any type of credit of doing the right thing as a leader,
Mm.
and it makes you look weak. And so here's what I do believe. I believe, I was saying in my keynotes, and I say if someone's got a bad attitude, that's their fault. If you're paying them, that's our fault, right? And so here's what I found. And now I've been in leadership, I don't even know if I want to say it, over 30 years now. And I have, through my coaching clients, I have probably right now several thousand employees that I deal with
Yeah.
through the leaders. Not once. I'm not exaggerating this. Not once in my entire life as a leader have I ever heard someone get rid of that top performing bad attitude ever and say, "Oh, that was a mistake."
Yeah.
Not once. They've all said, "Oh my God, I'm glad. I wish I would have done it sooner. I wish I would have done it sooner." And then what ends up happening is customers come to them, and peers come to them, and employees come to us. Holy crap! About time.
Yeah.
And it's a bad look. So if you have a high performing person with a bad attitude, I'm not saying fire them. I'm saying sit down with them and say, "Darren,
Mm.
we need to talk." Because most leaders don't even confront them. But I
Yeah.
would go to you and say, "Darren, I love what you're doing, but my
Yeah.
God, you are a tornado of disaster."
Which
And
comes
you
back
didn't
to
make
that.
how many good people who might be in a bad spot
Yeah.
can change.
Yeah.
And others just change, the old saying, change the people or change the people.
That's it. That's it. And that the leader that doesn't do that comes back to the comment you made before, and that it's quite a selfish approach, because as long as that particular person's making the numbers look good, then theoretically the leader will look good in front of their leaders because the numbers are the numbers, right? So as long as the numbers are coming in, nothing to see here.
And listen, and don't, leaders who are doing that, you're not fooling anyone.
No,
Everyone knows it. Unfortunately, your boss knows it. And they go,
absolutely.
"Oh, well, Darren's not any good. He's got Bobby, who's a complete jerk. And if Bobby left, Darren would go underwater." I mean, it's all visible.
Mm.
And so, you know, here's what I do believe. I think being a great sales leader is like being a great dad, being a great person, being just, it's never an easy time to do the right thing, and there's never a right time to do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And so we've got to live that.
Mm.
And it's a lot harder. There's an old saying, if you want to see what what is it? If you want to see what someone believes in, look at their checkbook and their calendar,
Yeah.
right? And so I think of a sales leader, you want to see what they believe in, look at their team.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. So as we sort of bring this into a landing, we talked earlier before we press record around getting the sales team sales fit. And we saw this over COVID where I guess the way that people sell, the way that people basically work, do business has for many industries fundamentally changed. And yes, there are a lot of organizations coming back to the face to face, but there's a lot more hybrid work, a lot more sales teams that are now a combination of face to face and working from home. What are some key things for certainly for sales leaders in 2024 and moving forward that we need to get people back onto the sales treadmill to get them fitter?
Yeah, it's to your point. I got several calls. I'm right, and it's what we're in May now, almost May. Well, you're in May. I'm in April still, um, and and here we are, 4 months in, and I've done several keynotes on this idea of how we get back into selling shape, because and I have the same conversation with my pre-speech understanding calls where they say, Nathan, here's the deal. For 3 years, we haven't had to sell. We just had to answer the phone. And
Yeah.
quite candidly, we didn't have to do that very well. We still sold. And now we're finding we got to get back out in the business. And some people have never even sold a person before. Some of the new hires have never gone toe to toe. They've all done, and so what do you do here? And so here's my challenge to people. You've got to get back in selling shape, just like if you're getting back in physical shape. Sales leaders have got to get into weekly practice sessions. They got to get in their one-on-ones and say, let me look at your in scrimmage and teach how do we have a sales call. We've got to get back to the cadence of proactively reaching out to opportunities. And that's not just cold calling, but it's a heck of a lot more than just social media.
Yeah.
And so, whether it's learning how to ask for referrals, but sales leaders have got to get their people back into the shape of activities that are proactive. And you're going to have to go back a little bit to the managing the behaviors and activities of people and pushing people to do the right things. And so that's where we got to be. I think the leaders have got to teach it, and then they got to demand it, and then they got to inspect what they expect.
Yeah.
And again, going back to not just did you reach out to 50 people, but what happened to the 50 people, and what'd you say, and let's get into character, and let's scrimmage it. And maybe, there's a reason someone said, today's voicemails don't work. No one returns phone calls. I'm like, no one returned phone calls in the 80s either. If no one returned your phone calls, that means your message was terrible, right? I mean, I call LinkedIn unemployment end. Anytime someone loses a job, I get a friend invite. You probably get them all the time. I bet I get one a day.
Yeah.
That I've helped with social media, so because I'm not very good at it, as you know, like my calendar. We get a message every day or several, someone trying to sell some service.
Yeah. All the time.
We've got to get beyond this, right? And so getting back into selling shape is getting our guys to focus on the activities, teach them the words and the behaviors, hold them accountable to doing it. And it's from setting the appointment to doing the discovery meeting, to closing the sales, to establishing value, to asking referrals. None of that's changed. It's like a golf.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed in golf. The clubs are fancier. They got a lot of new technology. It's still the same golf swing and still the same golf course. Sales, the same idea. We got a lot of new tools. Our clubs are a lot nicer, and we can do cool demos, and we can do a lot more technology stuff. But the aspect of playing the game of sales, of getting out there and introducing ourselves to people who don't know us today,
Yeah.
and showing value of why someone would leave a current provider of service or products and coming to us, it's the same game. We just have got to make sure we're winning the game through practice, discipline, skill, and impact.
And doing the fundamentals well, because you mentioned the shiny objects that, like in a golf game, you got this massive driver that's got a head like this. And when I look at my drivers, they're really small because they were back in the 90s. You've got so much technology that salespeople and sales leaders have access to now that I almost think a lot of them just rely too heavily on that will do the selling for them. You've got to strip it right back and say, what is the fundamental purpose of selling? in the first place, right? And my view is, and I'll be interested in your take as we kind of wrap this up. It's not about your product. It's not about your service. You've got to believe in your product, and you've got to believe that you can have a solution that can solve a problem. But fundamentally, it's the problem that you got to be able to articulate. That if that customer has that problem and you can articulate that, then they're going to lean forward and want to know about your solution. But it's not about leading with your product. So if you can be a good business person and be empathetic and curious and understand and bring insights to the table, they're more likely to lean forward and listen to what you've got to talk about rather than saying, hey, Nathan, I've got this beautiful, I wish this was an iPhone 15, but it's actually an iPhone 11. It's a pretty good device. It's got all these features. Would you like to buy one? And most people are going to say, no, bugger off.
Yeah, yeah, love that word, bugger. It's awesome. Um, yeah, well, and again, I'll kind of wrap up with this. It goes back to the idea that, quite candidly, in any industry, there's probably 5 or 6 products that do the exact same thing. And I tell salespeople, if you will be the person they want to hire, then they will hire and they will buy from you.
Yeah.
Selling it's a skill that we've got to practice, but then it goes back to the idea of putting ourselves out there and giving ourselves that chance, that opportunity. It's a skill. And so I think as leaders, as sales leaders, that's where we got to push. In the last bit of this, here's what I will tell you. And you heard it from Nathan here on May 1st, 2024 for you. This next 24 months will be the single largest sales gap in your lifetime and my lifetime. And what I mean by that is this: the difference between those who make the sale and don't make the sale. The gap between this is going to be the largest gap ever. And here's going to be the difference. Those who continue to wait and do what they did in COVID or do what they did before in this reactive and kind of passive sales approach, they are going to see significant losses. And those who are implementing the proactive, get into shape, selling skills, disciplines, behaviors, they're going to take off. Because here's what I do. I don't care what the economy is. I don't know how many down economies I've been a part of, but a lot. Great salespeople always have great sales no matter what. Because they make it. They don't wait on it. And that's where we're going to see in the next coming years.
Love it. Love it. So Nathan, love this conversation. Greatly appreciate you coming on the podcast. For people who want to know more about you and to get access to these best-selling books that you've mentioned, a number of them, the Sales Leadership Playbook, Sales Professional Playbook, Serve Up, Coach Down, and there's another couple of others I've just top of mind. But where can they get access to those, and where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Man, you can connect with me by going to nathanjamail.com, www.nathanjamail.com. Please go to our social media links. We put all our blogs on there. We typically write one a week. And then if you want the books, which Serve Up, Coach Down, Leadership Playbook, Sales Leaders Playbook, Sales Professional Playbook, all by my favorite humble author, you can get them on Amazon anywhere. And you can get them at the big bookstores. But if you're like me, I buy like 99% of my books on Amazon. And it's available on Audible. I do read all my books personally. Nice. And it's available in e-reader and all that good stuff.
Cool. And you and I are connected on LinkedIn. So I'm sure that people who listen to this would like to connect with you on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'd be more than happy to do that as well.
Would love to.
Awesome. Mate, enjoy the rest of your evening over there in Marble Falls. Great to have you on the podcast, and let's do this again.
Darren, thanks a lot, man. Take care, my friend.
Cheers, mate.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.